over 35 experience in real estate development, city planning, infrastructure design, city planning, and construction. His career actually goes way back when he started in the 1980s in Alaska
Yeah.
and made his way to Florida to ends of the United States, I guess. David and I actually worked for the same firm, but at different times, and I just wanted to talk about that for a minute. The name of the firm is Coastal Engineering Consultants in Naples, Florida, where their headquarters is located, and they have since opened an office in Louisiana. David was working, of course, as a civil engineer in the firm and got all the planning assignments and became a planner the old-fashioned way and did such a great job of setting up all the files on the work, shall I say, outlines. It made my job that much easier. When I came in, the firm was without a planner for a few years, and then I came in and it was very easy because he trained some of the other engineers to do it, and it was actually very easy. But our paths crossed on many projects, and we worked in Collier County, where Naples is located, for different firms and corporations and for different clients for many years. So David and I have a personal relationship as well. I wanted to just state that for the record. He's a good friend. Dave is the CEO of Metro Forecasting Models, which works with local governments to analyze land use policies, and they provide recommendations for long-range planning. He has made many presentations for the American Planning Association and the Florida Planning and Zoning Association at their annual conferences regarding a whole host of topics, but mostly in terms of mixed use, transportation systems, land use applications, and growing populations. And one of the areas where he has specialized in is planning for growth in Collier County, which is where the community of Naples is located in Southwest Florida. He has also spoken at various sessions and workshops for the Urban Land Institute since 2010, and he is a former district council chairman for ULI. Today, he is going to talk to us about emerging trends with emphasis on infrastructure, AI, and other issues that we're reading about lately and looking forward to. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to David.
Can you all see my slides? Yay. Okay, good. Well, Vince, thank you very much. Vince is a great friend, a mentor. I really appreciate his friendship, guidance, and just being an all-around great guy. Thank you very much for inviting me today. Pleasure to be here. So you heard him say to MFM, we only work for government. That does give me sort of a bent or an angle. I like to think I wear the white hat now. I used to wear the black hat. I was my best client hired me away from Coastal, and I became her vice president of development, and then I became her vice president of development and construction, and kept growing and growing. And anyway, through that process, I met Dr. Paul Van Buskirk, and we fostered a friendship over about a 10-year period, and then formed this company. My background, as Vince said, is in engineering, planning, and I have a master's in public administration, where I really studied on fiscal impact analysis and such to help our clients understand the fiscal parts of the decision. My partner is Dr. Paul Van Buskirk, FAICP. All right, so first of all, let's shatter all those expectations. You're not going to learn anything crazy new. What I'm trying to do is sort of tie the things you've heard or are in the news sort of into something that might be useful. I've got a little bit of preaching, a little bit of teaching, probably more preaching than teaching. I'll try to tell you when it's a personal bias. I try very hard to reveal those things, so I'm not trying to push something on you. My opinion may not be your opinion. So let's talk about our customer. These fine people right here, right? The generations. My partner, Dr. Paul, it says traditionalist. I think of that more as the silent generation. Boomers, that's my folks. My folks are some of the older boomers. They're in their early 80s now. There's Gen X. I'm an actual very old, I was born in 66, so I'm right on the cusp. I could have been a boomer, but I failed. I'm only a Gen Xer. Millennials, we used to have a millennial here, but they left. as millennials might do. And we have three Gen X or three again, Gen 2020. I think of that more as Gen Z. We have three Gen Zers in our office, and including my son who does coding. And so, not to be cruel or mean, but the traditionalists and boomers, there's less and less of those every day. There's of course no more of the other ones each day, but our Gen Z are slowly emerging into the workforce, and there's things that are happening along the way. So I pride myself usually in presenting my data. This is not my data. It's stuff that I abhor downloading data, but we went out and grabbed this big picture stuff. I generally don't work on the entire United States of America at one time. Be a nice gig if I could get it. But so our present population's 340 million. In 15 years, think about that. When I was younger, when I had less gray hair, 15 years was a long time. But man, as I get older, I'm 59 now. 15 years is boom, like just that. We're going to be another 40 million people. So I don't mean anything by that. Just we're approaching close to 400 million. Boomers. So we have 73 million baby boomers. I'll make that point a couple times. So today, and this is important because you hear these numbers and they present it very linear. There's 10,000 baby boomers retiring every day, and that's true. And it's also true the oldest retired in 2011 and the youngest won't retire until 2029. What's not true is that 10,000 boomers have retired every day in between those two dates. They haven't. In fact, probably on the last day of 2029, maybe 100 boomers will retire at that point. But what's important is right now we have a lot of this transition happening and people leaving the workforce, which leads to, I'm sure you've noticed, hard to find talent, even bringing back retired colleagues to help fill the talent gap that we have while we're still training our millennials and our Gen Zs. So we have 73 million baby boomers, we have 80 million millennials, 69 million Gen Z, and 65 million Gen X. And then in our workforce, not surprising. So millennials are number one at 35, and that's a stable cohort because they're a couple of decades away from retiring, and they've been in the workforce in theory a couple of decades too. So that's a nice chunk there. Then you have me, Gen X, 31%, and in theory I'll be retiring in 2032 or something like that. So I've still got quite a few years left on me, but my generation will begin now fading out over the next 20 years. Gen Z is 18 because they're just entering the workforce. My son is 23, so are all his friends, and they're getting jobs and so forth. But there's, a lot of them are still in school and everything. So we're going to see that grow to probably 30, 35% as well over the next 10, 15 years. And then basically replacing the boomers, right? As the boomers sort of phase out over the next 5 to 10 years or so. Anyway, so understanding the workforce composition, again, I don't mean anything by this. I'm not forecasting. It's just interesting to look at how the dynamics, and I know we know this because we come to work and we see these things happening day to day. I've got lots of shocking things. This is my first shocking thing. Housing is expensive and there's not enough of it. I know, mind blowing, right? So we have housing shortages. I don't have all the answers for it. Certainly affordability is an issue. We're seeing some zoning reforms. I'm a live and let live kind of guy. The West Coast is, I don't say outlawing single family, but they're removing the requirement for single family zoning. Uh, that's an interesting approach. I know there's many places around America that are very, very tied to their single family home and they're not high density areas. So I think, as planners, one thing we could do is less vilification of people that choose to live in a certain lifestyle. Now, if they live that lifestyle, they should pay for it. I've read a lot of things about, hey, the problem with suburbia is they don't pay for themselves. It's the cities that pay for people who live in suburbia. And I'm not here to argue that that could be true. I do I do believe people should pay what it takes to live where they live, but again, not vilify them. I mean, I live in a very unique, weird bubble, but we have single houses in my county that support entire schools. Right, they're 500, 400 million dollars. Their taxes are beyond what I can even comprehend earning in my entire lifetime, and that's every year. Not income. I'm talking property taxes. So that's people will talk down about that. I'm like, hey, man, I'm glad someone's paying that freight. Otherwise, my taxes would be higher. We definitely have the missing middle. And one of the last projects I did as a developer or working for my developer client is I wanted to. the area is called Lehigh Acres, and it's 110,000 platted lots. And it has like three 7-Elevens. I'm kidding, but I'm not. It has, I mean, about a tenth of a percent of the commercial they're going to need, right? And so back when they had a population of 40,000 people, I bought 100 acres just right next door outside of that pre-platted area. And my genius concept was, hey, let's build a bunch of commercial and see what happens, you know? But part of that, you know, I didn't need 100 acres of commercial. In case you didn't know, that's a lot. That's beyond a lot, right? 10 million square feet. No one needs 10 million square feet in one location. And so I wanted to build some multifamily. Uh, and what it's going to sound altruistic, it wasn't. I wanted to make some Benjamins, but I wanted to build some apartments for firefighters, school teachers, the young and the old, people that need the one-bedroom places. And so I'm negotiating the PUD with the city, and they wanted me to build 1,200 square feet. Well, if I build 1,200 square feet, I got to charge for 1,200 square feet. I can't build 1,200 square foot units and charge 400 square foot. I'm going to go broke. I'm in a real hurry. And in the negotiations, the only way they would let up on me is if I agreed not to rent them, but to make them condos for sale. Um, that kind of thinking as planners, we need to somehow educate our policymakers that smaller units are not bad. Because, and maybe you live, this is not a problem where I live, it's a huge problem. The minimum size house you can build is 1,000 square feet. End of discussion. It's illegal to build anything smaller than that. And while I'm not saying we should pack a family of four into 1,000 square foot bedroom house, uh, you know, for a single or a couple, 1,000 square feet's, you know, big, and you can live with less. Um, so duplexes, fourplexes, ADUs, those are opportunities, obviously, to sort of answer that trending need, and various markets are answering it in different ways. I have yet to see something very, you know, truly successful that just, you know, solve the problem quickly. And I think it's here to stay. But as planners, we can help educate our policymakers. Also, you know, the vocal minority. I had a project that I think, so it was zoned for 245 units. I was asking for 142. Oh my God, 142. There's no way we could do that, even though it's zoned. And this is 80 by 125 lots. So they beat me up all the way down to 104. 16 public hearings later, it finally gets approved. So with the county, by listening to those 20 people in the red t-shirts that says, you know, vote no, we hate Dave. And I don't care. I lost a lot of sleep in that 4-year period. But in the end, we lost 40 to 50. When we were doing this, we were going to build 300,000 square foot homes, or sorry, $300,000 homes, which at the time was an upper middle class family. This is in the early 2000s. And instead, it got converted to $1 million neighborhood because the density was so low, people bought into that. So the county sort of shot themselves in the foot through the process. Um, and it's sort of a shame. Again, so if we can educate our policymakers that NIMBYism, you know, it looks like a lot of people, but 20 people doesn't supplant the need to fix things for thousands of people. Also, a problem not only where I live, but I work all over the place, and some places duplex is high density multifamily. Man, these people, they want a 3-2 with a white picket fence, and I have nothing against it. I live in such a thing. I love it, but I don't think you should be forced to live in that or not live in that. And a lot of policymakers, they think that multifamily is bad. I'll tell you my personal thing. What I try to sell it on is, hey, here's where multifamily doesn't belong. Let's not put that thing out in the middle of nowhere. That doesn't help anybody at all. If we're going to have multifamily, it needs to be at commercial nodes where we have a very short trip length. Possibly employees could live there. This is where nodes of 100, 200 units. Keep in mind, when I'm saying this to some of my clients, they're like, oh, 100 units. They're like freaking out over the crazy high numbers and 100 units. So I try to, you know, ease them in with baby steps along the way. Another thought to address this problem are the use of land trusts by NGOs. Again, it may or may not work for your particular jurisdiction. And something we've done recently as an experiment is we actually bought an old golf course and we hired a developer to put 400 units on it, I think mostly designed for veterans. But the idea is that we own the land as the people, and so we control it. And so the developer can't go crazy, and no hedge fund's going to buy the property and then jack up all the rents. The developer is subject to our whims. Of course, they need to make a profit. I get that, but it's not going to get something that goes into private equity and gets scaled all out. Now the rents are 20,000 a month. And I'm exaggerating, but here it's not uncommon for a one bedroom to cost 2,500 a month. It's just ludicrous as far as costs go. So I have a little box here. I wanted to just share something with you. Back in 2019, I had the extreme honor of building the first master plan for a large sheriff. And in that analysis, took me a year. I interviewed over 70 leadership positions in the sheriff's office, and more importantly, they gave me 2.5 million calls for service. They call them incidents. To analyze. Oh, I was like a kid in a candy store, and I want to share a bias that I actually got this from my parents. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, before I moved to Alaska and then moved to Naples, and my parents felt that wherever we had a high density multifamily or even multifamily, crime was there. And maybe it was, but not because of the multifamily. And so when I was digging through the data, I ran tests on it and I compared single to multi. And you know what? I couldn't find a difference. On a unit by unit basis, that there is no more crime at multifamily than single family. Yes, you have bad neighborhoods. Yes, you have bad actors, and those are set asides. Multifamily itself is not crime ridden, even though everyone seems to claim that it is. The data just didn't bear out. So I wanted to share. I thought for sure it would, but was turns out crime at single family and multifamily is usually a sign of complacency. Right? I'm at my house. I left my car unlocked. The kids come along on break. They lift up the handles. They find your phone. They take it, run away, and they find 10 others out of 100 cars they check. So for them, that's a big payday night. But we're not talking about hardened criminals. We're talking about crimes of opportunity. I'm not saying you shouldn't break the law. I'm just or saying you should anyway. I'm not trying to vilify the kids, but I'm not trying to draw a point either that's okay. It's of course it's not. So mixed use, and forgive me, I'm just a little preachy. We also all know about mixed use. It's literally been around for millennia. When I was in Italy back in 2019, and we went to Pompeii, and I spent huge money. I think I spent $50, and I hired an archaeologist as a guide. Wonderful thing if you ever get the chance to do it. And he took me to the first Starbucks. So this Pompeii has this big central market area where you go to do your major trading and such. But on the neighboring streets, you could buy cups of soup and other things. And so he took us to one of these areas where they found cabbage remnants and stuff. So as they knew soups and things were being served there. And he pointed out that above, you could see that they actually had plumbing. Just amazing, amazing stuff. They had plumbing going upstairs where things would flow down. And that's where actually the slaves lived upstairs. So here we have a business downstairs and the employees, slaves, living upstairs, right? And so mixed use, this concept is very, very old, and we're still trying to get it right for some reason. A number that I'd like to share with you, and again, if you want to debate this later, we can. But a mistake I keep finding is that planners use their gut instincts when maybe they don't have any instincts for commercial. I've seen projects that have 200 or 300 multifamily units and 20 or 30,000 square feet of commercial. Well, if the expectation is for those people to use that, I got a number for you. It's real easy. It's on your hand. 5. Your normal person can support about 5 square feet of stuff they need every day, right? And so if I've got 300 units times 2, 600, 600 times 5 is 3,000. That's what you need. A nice sized coffee shop. Now, if you've got a tenant or you're going to put your business down there, that's a different story. But if you're trying to make the units sort of support themselves, true mixed use, I see this over and over. Now, in these cases where we see I have a lot of maybe pedestrian traffic, then these businesses are going to do great. Okay, but I see this happening like in a silo. Like here's this out in the middle of this industrial area, they build this multi-use building, and who's going to use that space that's for retail? Well, people don't need swimsuits every day to live in those units upstairs, and they haven't really thought those things through. So I see things then sort of not failing, but not doing very well because no one needs the space or that much space. So maybe trim those down if you're involved with a mixed use. These are wonderful though for extending our economic day and of course economic development. Okay, migration, this is not new, right? We know people are moving, right? My parents moved from the West Coast. Finally, it took them 35 years to follow me to Florida. They finally figured it out. So look, we have Texas with almost 600,000 last year moving there, almost 500,000 to Florida, 165,000 to North Carolina, and Arizona with 150. And then, of course, those people came from somewhere. These are not net numbers. So the growth, I think, is net on the left side, but on the right side, these are not net numbers. The table I found had the data, had both in and out migration. So I'm not saying net 230 moved out of California, but definitely 230 left and moved in Texas, Florida, whatever, New York, Illinois, New Jersey. And so the thing I'm trying to point out is when areas are growing, that's one set of, I need more churches, schools, fire stations, shopping centers, right? And when people leave, sometimes the opposite can occur. When I was the chair of ULI, I had the pleasure of meeting one of the former mayors of Pittsburgh, Tom Murphy, and he was sharing with me that how the population had decreased from I think their peak was around 600,000 in the 70s, late 70s, and presently I think it's around 300,000. So it's fallen a whole lot. He said, Dave, I've got like 70 churches that are completely empty. I've got dozens and dozens and dozens of schools with no kids in them. And what's the solution to that? I don't have an overnight solution to that problem, but one thing I'm a big fan of is repurposing and or demolition. Now, obviously, I'm an efficiency guy. I like to repurpose when we can, but sometimes when we leave an old building, it invites crime or makes you think this area is not a good area. When if we tore the building down and people see a blank slate, that kind of opens their eyes. And I've got a picture to demonstrate that as well. So back to the boomers, we got the 73 million that are aging. They need more. Except my parents had a two-bedroom house. Now they actually built a one-bedroom house. They need good health care. Just like we all need good health care, but they need good access to it so they can get to things quickly. This is off the internet, the walkable communities. I want just a personal story. I live in one of these. I'm not old, but I live in one of these communities. Um, I don't know why people keep saying they want walkable because you know what they want? They want golf cartable. They want to use their golf cart. I live in a very cool subdivision. We don't have our own mailboxes, but I'm only 700 feet from our post office, our car wash, our restaurant. All those things are inside my community. But people will drive their car 700 feet to go to the mail, post office or whatever. But it's a nice sentiment, right? And of course, the migration to the Sun Belt and rural areas. So far as a trend goes, climate resiliency. I'm tired of all of the political weight associated with some of this stuff, and so um, I'd like to encourage you to embrace the word resilient, right? Because we can fight about whether the climate's changing or not, um, uh, but you can't fight things should be resilient, right? If we get knocked down, who's against standing back up quickly, right? Let's build things so that we can recover quickly from these things. A lot of the things that are getting damaged during these storms are in fact older structures and things. So when we build them back, there's a line of thinking that says we shouldn't have built there at all, and that's a line of thinking, and maybe they're right. But in some cases, it's not that you shouldn't have built there; it's that you can't build something out of balsa wood and expect it to survive a storm with a 10-foot storm surge. Green urbanism is also, it's not a fad, it's a trend, and I think it'll continue with a set of people. Unfortunately, we've lost some of the tax credits and such that incentivize solar panels on houses and things like that. Even when we had them, though, let's be honest, 20 years ago, I was going to do this on my house. And 20 years ago, Florida was 3 years behind in funding their, what do you call those? Like tax credits or whatever, so that it would cost less. It was going to cost me $20 a watt back in 2006 to put solar panels on my house. My understanding that's down to like $5 a watt now, but still, when I can pay 12 cents a watt to just buy the electricity, spending $5 for something is quite a bit. Um, so when I was doing the research, mobility came up, and then I wanted to break it into urban and suburban because we have some of the same issues. So the bottom two pictures I'd like to point out. Unfortunately, this is the trend I don't like. What we have here is we have people they get done with their scooter or bike and they just leave it because they can. Um, but we have so micro mobility scooters are now electric. Everything is all the rage. In the urban area, we have greater density, e-scooters, bike shares, and e-bikes. I'm not saying we don't have e-bikes in the urban areas, but certainly in the suburban, where we have less dense, we see a lot of e-bikes. It is a go-to mode of transportation for people to get longer distances, right? These bikes can do, well, actually, I got a quick story. I was going home about 6 months ago, and I'm on a major north-south corridor. I'm doing 5 miles over. I was doing 50 to 45, and out of the corner of my eye, I look over, and there's a bike on the sidewalk, not in the road, and he's passing me. So he's doing 55 on a sidewalk. Pedestrians are not used to seeing things going at a missile speed, you know. And again, I'm not here to vilify anyone, but as planners, I don't have a an absolute thing. But maybe we need speed humps. I don't know. They have them in roads. Maybe we need to start introducing those in sidewalks or something. But e-bikes are definitely becoming an issue, and we have younger people on them too. We've just had a kid die here recently because he was on an e-bike. And he didn't stop in a car. He was supposed to stop at a stop sign. He didn't, and the car hit him. So as planners, let's keep this stuff in mind. If you're working in transportation, what can we do to either accommodate these electric features or make them more safe if possible, and of course protect our pedestrians. On the EV side of things, my good friend from college, he's a huge believer. He's got two Teslas, and he lives in the DC area. So for him, his commute is always 25 miles. So he's got it down pat. He came down. We went to a heavy metal concert last summer, and I hadn't really been in a Tesla before. And I tell you what, here's my recollection of the whole weekend. He got in and he said, "Well, I can't talk. I got to go charge." And so we went to Target and charged up, came back, and then next morning we left to head to Miami. Before we could go to the concert, we had to go charge. So we had to wait in line 45 minutes and then charge for another 45 minutes. And then we got to the concert, and then things got a little longer. And then before we left town, yep, we had to charge one more time so we could leave town. So in a 24-hour period, I got the experience of charging a Tesla 3 times. We drove 250 miles, okay? I think I'm not dissing Teslas or whatever. I'm saying when electric cars become a little less range anxiety and a little easier to give longer distances with hydrogen or something else, I think that'll become more of a thing. I'm not saying electric cars are dead. I'm just saying that I think that we're at full absorption for the early adopters, and as the technology gets better, then I think we're going to see greater adoption. Remote work, hybrid patterns. So we're seeing this change not so much in suburbia, but in our more dense areas. We're seeing the office either because it's just not needed, or maybe it's of an older quality that doesn't fit with today's needs. There's a lot of different reasons why. But we do have commercial real estate challenges. So we do a lot of work for MPOs. What's really fascinating is they've been sharing with me is, Dave, riddle me this. If everyone's working from home, why is my daytime traffic double what it was before the pandemic? Right? So someone's driving. We're not sure who, but someone is out there using up road capacity in the middle of the day, which used to be unconventional. So not only do we still have the AM PM rush hours, but now we also have sort of the daytime sort of slug, if you will. I'm a big fan of, again, of adaptive reuse. I came out of, I'm a product of the Great Recession when I left my development company, obviously, because there was nothing to do after 2008. And so I spent the next 5 years helping lenders fix their broken projects and bringing them back online and helping them sell off their assets. And so that's a big thing. But we also need to recognize when things are dead. And when they're dead, the market is trying to tell us something, that it's the wrong use at the wrong time in the wrong place. And so from that, I want to jump to talking about, this is on the top picture here is the first Walmart in Collier County. It was built in the late 80s, early 90s. And I'm about to tell you it really happened to me, but I'm not saying it's true. A really good friend of mine, actually, she's from Alaska, and we're going to go have dinner tonight together. She said, Dave, there's this cool store called Walmart, and everything they sell is from America. It probably wasn't true back then. Definitely not true today. But so the red area you see sort of around the corner, that's really where the Walmart was. There's one of my favorite Chinese restaurants was right here where this broken window is, or broken sign. So Walmart was just killing it. And so they bought the property across the street, and they built their 200,000 square foot mega store. And that began a 20-year death cycle for this center. This is about 150, maybe 180,000 square feet. And what the market said is, hey, this was a viable use at one point in time, but now we don't need this retail anymore. It's in the wrong place at the wrong time and the wrong type. Well, it took 20 years for things to turn around to people to recognize the obvious. And so the picture below is what it looks like. Actually, this looked like about a year ago. And the funny thing is, this picture, the vantage point is from um, the courthouse where this project was approved. So right below where if the vantage point of this picture is a campus with 3,000 government employees and no food. So the beautiful thing is you have all these restaurants out in front of these that remained out in front of these 300 units. So now I've got more things that I need, housing, different types, smaller houses. I've got housing variety now. This area was all single family before. Now I actually have variety. I've taken away commercial that I don't need. Oh, by the way, the impacts are basically zero because I had water for a commercial business. I had all the sewer capacity. I've got the traffic lights. I've got the schools. I've got the parks. This was a no-brainer. This is no impact to society and yet a better use of the land. More importantly, our policymakers love what we call free money. Okay, so in 2011, the low for this was assessed at $9 million, but now in 2024 it's 100 million. So it's 11-fold increase in income with zero cost to the government. We call this revenue hiding in plain sight. So to put you can effectuate this kind of change in your area, get rid of the things we don't need and add the things we do need, and you make money in the process. This is what we want to encourage our policymakers to embrace this line of thinking. Unfortunately, most policymakers will look at this building and say, well, it's commercial. It's commercial. It's always got to be commercial. Well, that's old thinking, and unfortunately, that's why I say sometimes it's better to tear things down and start with a blank slate because people get the pigeonholed on what's right in front of them is what has to be there. And in fact, this is the exact wrong thing to put in this location. So with planning, we have a lot of someone has a chat. Someone trying to say something. Oh, conventional bike. Sorry, I just noticed that. I didn't mean to ignore that. I'm busy focusing on my slide. The question is, what about conventional bicycles? Well, conventional bicycles are great and important, but they're not doing 60 miles an hour on sidewalks. And yes, we need to make room for those bikes as well. But these electrified things have seemed to, I mean, I'm so old, I actually had to pedal my bike when I was a kid. Sorry, I was late to the party there, Stephen. So in my business, we crank out a lot of spreadsheets, a lot of numbers, a lot of GIS, and I have an unusual brain. When I see the table that you see in front of you on the left-hand side, I have pictures in my head, but I recognize that I'm weird. And most people, when they look at this, they would rather shoot themselves. They don't want to look at numbers. They don't see what's in those numbers. And so I've had to work to try to how do I take these where I see this value and show it in a way that people will get the meaning that I'm hoping they'll get from it. So we had the great fortune for working for most of the counties on the west coast of Florida in 2023. So what that means is I'm now, because of my own data, nothing I downloaded, we know where every doorknob is, every unit, every business, every church, and every future business and every future house as well. Of course, those are mostly inland, not on the coast. And so when the storm before this was Helene. When Helene came through, we got the great idea. We went and downloaded the slosh models from NOAA. And we then took those and imported them to GIS, and we picked the 3-foot contour and we laid that down and cross-referenced against our data. And what we found, actually, I did a little summary here. So what we found was if the storm continued on the 9th of October 2024, at the point in time at which, and we published this on LinkedIn, we actually gave the time. This is from the 9 a.m. data or the 2 p.m. data or whatever. And it did change. I think we posted 6 updates to this. So this is impact this point in time. If it occurred this way, it was going to impact 455,000 housing units. Wrap your head around that one storm. And I'm not talking about, hey, it rained. These are homes that have at least 3 feet of standing water, either in their house or under their house. With 632,000 permanent residents at risk. And then, because I'm a nerd, I didn't want to know the house value, right? Who cares what you can sell your house for? How much is the structure worth? So we pulled the structure value, which is not escalated, and these numbers are with a B, a billion, right? So I added up, it's $169 billion worth of property, of structures that were in danger from this storm at this point in time. So we did this. Oh, you see the black things. You're probably thinking, well, Dave, that's the coastline. Well, you're sort of right. Those black things are houses. There's so many of them that they're so close together that they turn things black, and you can't see all of the housing units that we're displaying. So just in this area, we're showing you 400, those black things equal to 455,000 housing units. So this is our attempt at trying to make something easier to understand. So this is a trend that's not going to go away. How do we translate what we know into a way that people, policymakers, and the public will understand what we're trying to convey? I'm just a little bragging on this slide. So Charlotte County is one of our clients, and the morning after the storm, I'm talking about like 7:30 in the morning. I'm on the phone with management with this county manager, and they're looking to me for preliminary numbers. Now I don't know what's damaged, but I do know based on the 3-foot contour where we're like, and I was able to give them numbers and areas of neighborhoods so they could start planning their plan to rescue, right? So it was really, really heartwarming, or in terms of not being gut wrenching in terms of the damage, but heartwarming that we had the data. We were able to help them in real time with assessments of just how much damage could have occurred. Oops, sorry about that. Back over here. Okay, AI. One nice thing about having Gen Z working with you is they've helped me bring AI into the office. And I'm not talking about just chat. I'm talking about we now have integrated AI with our GIS. So we have it analyzing parcels for compatibility. We build out every single vacant parcel, privately owned vacant parcel in every database that we touch. And so we developed this software, and we can process 500,000 parcels in less than 30 minutes. It would take a planner probably a month or 2 months of going through that to do the same. And this, I would argue, it's more consistent. Now, with that said, we don't let AI make decisions for us. It gives us a suggestion. We then look at the suggestion, say, yep, that's a great suggestion. Sometimes we disagree. Well, you don't understand that there's this other complicating issue that no, that's really going to be multifamily, not industrial or whatever. Um, so in the pros, it's really good at huge data sets. It can also replace some of the lower level jobs. Now, if you're just come up and coming in the market, that's bad. But for us older planners that need help doing some of the more mundane things, man, AI can really help us with some of that less technical things in processing. We're also seeing a lot of our government clients are now bringing in auto review AI. There's a bunch of different companies selling this feature where you can import the PDF plans and it'll analyze. Now it's really good at, hey, you're missing the 10-foot setback or you're missing the landscape buffer. What AI is not so great at, and this, we're going to get this con here, is it's the nuances, right? Uh, uh, and that's where us as planners, we need to understand, and maybe someday it'll become so sophisticated that it'll catch the nuances. But if it does catch the nuances, then this next bullet point, bias. What bias is the AI bringing into it? Because as we've seen, people are not just, how do I put this? Building these large language models in a vacuum. There are some people are tainting them in ways, and you need to be aware of that because it can also taint the results coming back out of what we process with AI. And then again, over reliance on just tools that are set it and forget it, the black box technique. It's better if you understand what's in that black box because sometimes you don't know what can come out of a black box. In terms of ethics, we want to make sure that if we're using AI, that it's being equitable and fair in its decisions or recommendations. In fact, I'm a strong proponent of don't let AI do anything. Let it make recommendations and then let me look at those, and then I can quickly go through them and decide whether they're valid or not. We need to keep the human in human values. On the private sector side, and this is, I think we might need to look at how we bill things. And I work for only government, but I'm still on the private side. And if I got an hourly rate, and I figure out how to write something that normally would cost 40 hours, and I can write it in 4 with AI, I'm only supposed to charge for 4 hours, So we might need to look to stay ethical. We might need to look at our billing and do some things on a fixed fee that we know it might be able to use a tool to accomplish something that would take anyone else a large number of hours. We can now accomplish in a fraction of the time. Um, And then again, if you're using it, because some people I know planners are using this to build algorithms with Python, especially for traffic modeling. We need to make sure that when it's doing that, again, it's not putting in some bias into the situation. That's why black box is so bad. We want to make sure that we understand what's going on inside. Congratulations, last slide. Um, so my I have a personal concern about the birth rates in our country. Um, um, I don't know what to do. I think, the pendulum always overswings, we go from large families to small families to whatever. This does concern me, and I don't know what to do about it. A lot of youngsters have really no interest in having kids. Um, what is that going to mean for our schools and our public safety? Public safety meaning I know that my work with law enforcement and my friends at the fire departments, they're having a really hard time finding employees. Not because they're not paying enough, the people don't exist. Now, eventually that'll self-right itself, but the time between now and then could take 10 or 20 years. It impacts our workforce, of course, and our tax revenues, not only income taxes but property taxes. If we don't have if I I'm not predicting this, but I wonder what's going to happen when we have the boomers as they depart. They own a lot of housing units, and it's conceivable that we could find ourselves in some areas with more housing units than we need um, right? Now I'm a little jaded in our area. It is not uncommon for some of our homeowners. This is their fifth or sixth home. They're uber wealthy, right? They're only here 2 weeks a year. It's the benefit of living in paradise. Um, uh, Now, granted, if they own those homes, those are not all three two-starter homes, right? That are come on the millennials can buy or Gen Z can buy to live in. But the boomers own a lot of homes, and it's conceivable they could have more than we need, not tomorrow, but in 10 or 20 years. Maybe I'm wrong about that. That's a personal observation. I hope I am wrong. And then, of course, healthcare costs. I keep reading about how we don't have enough replacement doctors entering medical school. I don't have solutions to these things. They're just sort of things that keep me up at night, and I'd like to share them with you. And I know these pyramids kind of look weird, but here's 1980. We can see that we had not too many old people. We had a lot of young people, both male and female. As we jump to the year 2020, we see that now we have a lot more older people, a lot of older females, right? Because males tend to die younger. And then by 2050, look what we're looking at. Our population has almost shrunk, but it's more evened out. We have sort of an even distribution of the age groups. It'll be a fascinating time to be alive as we approach that. Done a lot of talking. I'm ready to do some listening if you guys want to ask some questions. I hope this was somewhat informative, entertaining. I'm sorry I didn't have any earth-shattering new trends to share with you, but I'd like to talk with you guys if you have any questions or want to discuss.
Thank you, David, very much. If anybody has questions, just start firing away.
David, I have a question for you. This is Jeff Ray. I'm a private practice planner in Omaha, Nebraska, working across the Midwest. Can you address household composition? As I've seen it, we went from I'd call traditional family, mom, dad, and 2.5 kids, to numerous single parent households, and how that has affected the housing market as well.
So, Jeff, great question. Nationally, it's hard to talk about. Funny thing is, I was just up in your neighborhood. I could have waved at you. I was in Iowa visiting a family member in something Indianola, just south of Des Moines. Lots of corn. You guys got corn, baby. So actually what you bring up, so we study demographics a lot, again, not nationally. I'm actually not seeing what you're talking about, where we have a lot of single parent households. I'm seeing a lot of singles. We just are not seeing a lot of kids. Now, in the minority areas, more Hispanic, we are seeing household sizes of 3, 4, 5, 6. But what we're seeing most of all especially in the newer multifamily is unrelated Gen Zers and or millennials that are not living together but roommates, Um, So you're not wrong at all. It's just I'm not seeing that observation. But what is the impact on, of course, the more fragmented families we have, the more housing units we need, right? It used to be the husband and wife and the kids all lived in the same house. Well, if there's a divorce, now I need, other units for things to go back and forth. Um, I don't have a lot to answer your question. I'm sorry about that. But let me dig into demographics and nerd out for just a second. So one of the things we do find is that household sizes change very small, very incrementally. Vacancy rates can change overnight, right? Now, of course, you can move, which creates a vacancy. So that's why it can change so quickly. But having a child or losing someone usually doesn't happen overnight or necessarily at will, right? Whereas vacancies, you can choose to move and change the vacancy rates. So as you're looking at demographics, look at that, and also look at your rentals. Rentals tend to have a much lower vacancy rate. One of the mistakes I see is people are applying a broad-based vacancy rate, like 20% or 15 or 10% to multifamily. And if it's one thing we found, if it's owned like condominium, that's absolutely applicable. That can happen. But when you have rental, I've never seen someone rent something and not live in it. Right. And multifamily landlords, their margins are so razor thin, they have to keep themselves at least 90%. Even at 90%, they're losing money. They really need to see about 95% occupancy. So if you're forecasting population or trying to guess how it'll change, looking at that rental component in your community can give some real clues of what your actual household demographics might be. Stephen.
Here in the part of Florida that seems to be losing population, do you feel that this housing supply accelerator and zoning reform and not NIMBY but YIMBY and all stuff is just going to lead us faster into the next phase of the cycle where there's like we were in 2008?
So, okay, I have a different perspective, and actually, so one of the ground zeros is Cape Coral. The Cape Coral has been my client for 20 years. In fact, Vince used to be the planning and zoning director there. So the difference that I'm seeing between the Great Recession and now is we had liar loans and we had normal people like you and me that had had a mortgage on 5 or 6 houses. We don't have that same situation now. And for whatever vacancies I have, it's not from people moving away. It's because homes got built and then no one moved into them. So it's different because look, 2008 was horrific seeing all these houses that were built and people had mortgages on them and lived in them. And then it looked like overnight, 20,000 people left Cape Coral. This is back in the between 07 and 09. The city of Cape Coral is a blue collar area. It has a lot of construction people in it. And when all the construction jobs dried up, the Cape Coral people left, I'm presuming, to Texas or someplace where there was a lot of building going on. So locally for me, I see this is much different than the Great Recession. Do we need maybe a housing reset? Yeah. One of the things, so again, I'm a number guy, I'm a data guy, and I see data misused and abused a lot. And one of the things I have this argument with parents all the time. They read a story about how Cape Coral, it's the sales are off 80%. Okay, well, 80% from selling 10 million houses a week, okay, so you're off from the peak of the peak of the peak. But compared to 2019, the houses are still 3 times the cost they were in 2019. I still have half the listings I did in 2019. And so I think a lot of the measurements they're taking are from false benchmarks and not what, you look back at 2019, 2020, what was normal, and you look and see, and people still have a huge return on an equity and their investment in their house and so forth. So I don't see doom and gloom, but again, Stephen, I don't live where you live, and you might have completely different circumstances, and I respect that.
Well, I was thinking with this group has heard from Jason Jordan twice since last fall, and about the housing supply accelerator, which is just creating, making it easier to put houses on the market. And the guy from Strongtowns, Chuck Marone, just threw a wrench in that and said, "We're we're we're just building ourselves into another oversupply situation." And Owen Beich, who's spoken with us a couple of times, said that since the market controls the price of housing or the value of housing, and that it's just, in stronger markets you're going to have higher prices, and I feel that that's the case. I mean, I'm looking at houses in Jacksonville where I live and in Nashville where I used to live, and you can get a very nice house in Jacksonville that would basically get you an ADU in Nashville if you're lucky. So the only thing I can think of is that Nashville is some kind of it's getting a lot of generational wealth. People are buying homes for their children, and it's pricing everybody else out.
Right. And it's funny you should mention because when I was traveling back from Iowa, I was delayed for a day and a half, yay, between the Dallas airport and North Carolina, not Raleigh. Anyway, Charlotte. And when I was in Charlotte, I met a woman that worked for a multifamily, and we were talking demographics and their minimum thresholds for occupancy and all that. She's from Jacksonville, and she was telling me how, in fact, they had been overbuilding in the Jacksonville area. And what I'm thinking, and again, I don't know this, but we had that huge problem here in the 05, 06, 07, where they're building tons of spec homes. Our builders are not building spec homes. They learned their lesson the very, very hard way in the Great Recession. But the only time you can not get away with that is multifamily, right? You either build all 300 units or you don't. And if you hit the market at the wrong time, you can wind up putting a whole bunch of units on the market, multifamily, that there's not a market for. That might, I don't know if that's what you're talking about or not in terms of rental. In terms of housing units, we're not seeing the overbuilding down here. They get a contract, they build a house. That's pretty much how it goes.
Is there any leftover or residual housing from the Great Recession? I'm thinking like Lehigh Acres or someplace like that, where they take another 20 years to build out or to
So
absorb.
by 2014, those were getting sucked up, and Lehigh Acres was, oh my, that was just a train wreck. We had homes that sold for $250,000 and all the copper, all of it stripped out of it, and they were selling them for $25,000. Of course, you had to go in and rewire the whole thing, and Chinese drywall and so many other problems like that. But Lehigh Acres, even in 2021, you got a house there is $350,000. The demand, it was just, and those low interest rates also allowed people to pay much, much more for houses. I know I sold my house in 2021, and the reason why they bought it is because they had an interest rate of 3.5%. They're now trying to sell the house and they can't because the borrowers, are paying 6.5, 7, and the payment's untenable. Whereas it was an easy payment for the person I sold to, the 3.5% mortgage. So, one of the things I've also learned in life is that you never know what's around the corner. And I'm not projecting that we're going to be better times tomorrow, but if interest rates do tick down, the law of unintended consequences, we could see a resurgence. I'm not saying we will, but we could. There's a lot of things I think going against housing right now, and if just one thing got better, we could see more of a change. Now, one thing, and I don't want to get into all the politics of this, but with us rebuffing the Canadians locally in Florida, holy cow, our tourism was down 40% this last spring. I don't know the answer to that, and I know a lot of Canadians in Florida are selling their product and going back to Canada or whatever. I don't know. We haven't seen the end of that. And back to the law of unintended consequences, that might unravel even more than I can imagine. We haven't studied exactly how many homes are Canadian, because no one's paid me to do it. But that could be a bigger problem than maybe we realized. Problem being, there's a lot more housing units owned by Canadians than maybe we thought, and it could have a big impact on the housing market.
Well, just driving across the state line, I on this trip back and forth to Nashville, and you see the signs that says you're leaving the free state of Florida. All I could think of is, well, thank God. Will they let me back in, or do I want to come? I mean, it's
Bring your passport.
It's this is the climate here is
I've lived for 35 years, sir. I know exactly what you're talking about. I've seen
okay.
many, many governors.
Yeah. anyway, I don't want to I'll start yelling and screaming, and that would upset the decorum of this
Right.
conversation. So,
Right.
but anyway, I am struck by the difference in the going rate for a house in Nashville versus a house in Jacksonville. And if you're just comparing apples to apples, a house in a walkable neighborhood in Nashville is above or below $1 million. I mean, all of these what do you call it, trust fund kids want to live in near restaurants and stuff like that, and it just made the the what I would call nice neighborhoods just price them right out of reach, and
Yeah.
it's kind of weird.
David, I have some comments.
Yeah.
Adam Rush, I'm an environmental consultant in Southern California, and I appreciate your information because it's very telling of what's going on here. We have a backlog of probably 2.7 million homes. The state, as many of you know, is becoming very aggressive on changing normal applications to buy right because of that NIMBY issue.
Mhm.
But I went on a tour on Tuesday of 1,200 square foot attached townhomes. And according to Zillow right now, they're going from the high sixes to the low eights for 1,200 square foot. And most of the folks there were home builders, but not to be prejudicial, but most of the women were like, I would never live here. The bathroom's too small, the rooms are too small, and they were 3 stories. They were nice, but keeping up with about 180,000 new homes. And on the flip side, I don't know if you look at any data regarding development fees, but it seems to be this rock and a hard place where sales are starting to slow right now. We're seeing probably a 20-30% drop just in the last month or so in year-to-year sales. But yet I'm looking at 4 jurisdictions in Riverside and San Bernardino County that are going through fee updates. $35,000 for a single family home just in development fees. And
Mhm.
so it's crazy. I don't know how, my kids wouldn't be able to afford a house in California. What do we do?
A lot of them are coming to Nashville, Adam. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. Well, I've had a lot of friends that have relocated to Nashville, to Chattanooga, and bought very nice acreage for, about the same of what you can get one of these townhomes for.
Yeah.
So my thoughts regarding like your development fees, yes, I'm seeing that many of my clients, again, I only work for government, they're raising their fees. And part of the problem, it's not that I'm not sympathetic, but the policymakers were so scared to raise them for so long. I have a client right now that hasn't raised them in 20 years. And so they're charging $3,500 for a fee that everyone else is charging $15,000 for. And what the building community is focusing on is, well, you're going to increase that 5 times. Well, yeah, but we're only taking it to what's normal. And if we don't have this money, we can't build the roads, and then we have to stop all development. And so
Exactly.
I'm not against your children owning homes. I want my son to buy a home, and we have sort of the same issues here, maybe not to that extreme, but at the same time, we got to charge the fee what it costs, because otherwise, government then gets so far behind. We can't make our capital improvements. One of the things we've noticed that's sort of a stealth issue is the level of service of fire departments is falling off a cliff because of all this development that's occurred, and the fire departments haven't been able to keep up with it. I had one client, an unnamed client. They added 24,000 people. That's more than one fire station in 18 months. It takes 3 to 5 years to plan and build a fire station. And we have like 6 clients that are going through the same issue right now. It takes 3 years to get a fire truck. And yet in 18 months, they need more than one of all these things.
Yeah.
So watch out for those things happening in your neighborhood too, that you might start seeing cracks in your levels of service that weren't really apparent during the trying to build and house as many people as possible. And I'm for that. But some of our public facilities, the level of service have slipped in some cases in dangerous levels.
Well, and residents, especially in my area, they want their own library. They want their own city hall. I mean, both are in retail strip centers. Everyone's like, why don't we have a community pool? I moved from Irvine, and we had 4 pools, and so the need is there. But of course, no one wants to pay for it. They want someone else to pay for it.
Right.
So
Yeah,
I have to scooch to another meeting, but
yeah, we pretty much have a policy that's enforced by the participants where they start dropping off at 4 o'clock. So Jeff had been host, and I just got a thing that I'm the host, and I'm sorry I didn't join the conversation as early as I should have, I suppose, but I'm the chair of the private practice division, and Vince is the professional development chairman. So on behalf of the division, Vince and I thank you very much for the presentation. Certainly raised a lot of questions, a lot of concerns, and fits in with a lot of what we've been, sort of ongoing dialogue that we've had among ourselves as members of the private practice division. So thank you. Thanks, Vince, for recruiting David.
Sure.
And we'll see you next month. I can't remember, but it's the 4th Friday in August. And stay tuned for the details. Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you all. Bye.
Take care.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.